In 2017, as the sun set on the day of the college entrance examination, the southern gate of Hengshui Middle School was crowded to a standstill. Amidst the stagnant traffic, my father turned his head from the driver's seat and handed me a smartphone, saying, "Use this for now, I'll get you a new one in a couple of days." It was a black iPhone 4, the same phone I had used during my junior high school years. After clumsily unlocking it, I encountered my first problem. I had forgotten how to type. This was an easily surmountable issue. I could use handwriting input. But forgetting went beyond that. I wasn't very adept with chopsticks. In Hengshui, to save time, I usually used a fixed iron spoon instead. Learning new dining etiquette was required, such as reusing chopsticks, not lifting the bowl, avoiding making noise, and chewing each bite at least 5 times. The amount of rice picked up with chopsticks was so limited that I often felt hopeless, as a bowl of rice seemed endless and required nearly half an hour to finish. But I also made a new discovery: rice grains themselves could be chewed, rather than being swallowed as a large lump of rice. My speech was too fast, and that needed correction too. Sometime in the middle of my sophomore year, during a break, my mother had to remind me multiple times to speak more slowly, or else it's not clear. Later, I found that to be true. During the 2 minutes of waiting for our morning exercise, we had to make the most of it by memorizing 2 extra poems, and the only way was to increase our speaking speed. Some people had a light and urgent tone, as if whispering. In contrast, those with louder voices sounded like a radio with a bad signal, sharp, unstable, and overly excited. This was not an issue at Hengshui, but it became a deficiency afterwards, often pointed out by others. I was anxious and practiced in front of the mirror, enunciating every word slowly and clearly, instead of mumbling a bunch of words. But when I encountered people who spoke slowly, I still became quite impatient, hoping to press the 1.5x speed button like on a progress bar. I had absolutely no idea about computers, apart from turning them on and off by myself. In college, I studied journalism and often had to write articles and papers, but I was much slower than others because I had to write everything on paper and then input it using a touchpad. Everything was done in the hidden corners of the library. Later, I learned that this ignorance was like obesity, impossible to hide. I became the subject of many jokes and often faced others' surprised questions. "Why don't you know this?" Sometimes it was mocking, "Can't you look it up on the internet?" Well, from my current perspective, I was almost a primitive back then. I didn't know what Weibo was, what hot trends were, didn't know there were browsers other than Baidu, and didn't even know how to download software. I kept making mistakes in common knowledge. One day, I casually complained, "New web pages are always difficult to load, my phone is too slow, I think I need to get a new one." A roommate immediately exclaimed, "It's not because your phone is slow that the pages don't load, it's the bad internet." She then asked me which mobile carrier I was using. Well, I couldn't answer that question, but I really wished I knew what a mobile carrier was back then. I became more and more taciturn. My self-esteem always made me hesitate before asking questions. There were too many things to adapt to. Pop stars and singers had changed several times. I couldn't understand current popular jokes, and even my metaphors had a primitive of flavor. I learned to take the subway. The subway car swayed, like a boat on a swift river in a cave. Taking the subway was painful for me. So was picking up parcels. These 2 things made me realize that there were completely meaningless and consumable things in the world. I never did such things in Hengshui, and one of the main reasons I could endure 3 years there was that every minute had a meaning. I passed by at Sanyao Express Station every day after class. After waiting for a couple of minutes behind the line, I told myself, enough, I can't waste any more time. After a month of not collecting my parcels and countless text messages, the Sanyao Express Station also lost patience, and my parcels disappeared into thin air. I have no idea where they ended up. During my freshman year, there was a period when I dug out printed materials from my high school days, materials for accumulation of knowledge, with the same paper and font as the irregular exams at Hengshui, even the smell. Having those materials under my pillow, occasionally touching them or flipping through the underlined parts and notes, made me feel as if I were still at Hengshui. But of course, it wasn't quite the same. It took me some time to adapt to the process of undressing before bedtime. In Hengshui, sleeping naked was against the rules and could result in a 5-point deduction from our class's quantitative score. On the night of the college entrance exam, it was the first time in 3 years that I carefully examined my body. I had grown leg hair, developed thick calluses on my middle finger and the soles of my feet, and had sprawling growth lines on my knees. I had grown 6 centimeters taller, gained 40 pounds, and had 2 cavities. I also discovered for the first time that I had a condition called follicular dysplasia, which meant I had no underarm hair. In my first year of high school, I had a bit of cleverness as a teenage girl. I altered my oversized school pants to make them slimmer and make my legs look slender and straight. Of course, it was quickly discovered and stopped, and I had to buy new pants. That day, I was shocked to find that my legs were like the filling tightly wrapped in sausage casings, stuffing the entire pair of pants. I realized how unattractive my body was, and how much I despised myself. Some of the bodily changes were hidden. Like most of my Hengshui classmates, I had severe stomach problems. I would wake up in the middle of the night with stomach cramps and break into a cold sweat. Despite my efforts to slow down, I still ate with gusto, taking at most 10 minutes to swallow all the food. When I bought a large bag of snacks and headed back to the dormitory, I felt a compelling urge to open the bag and start eating along the way. Walking down the street, I would unconsciously start running. The first time I went to the university cafeteria, I took out a book in front of everyone, intending to read while eating. Later, I found that I was the only one doing that. Fortunately, I made significant progress fairly quickly. This was thanks to my powers of observation and my commitment to learning. I secretly observed how other girls ate a bowl of noodles, picking up a few strands of noodles with chopsticks, placing them on a spoon held in the left hand, blowing on them, and then eating them, almost like a delicate ritual. Now, my manners during meals are quite dignified. There were some unexpected realizations too. During my freshman year, I first learned about and registered for WeChat. After mastering how to browse friends' moments, I discovered that many of my college classmates' moments traced back to middle school. Later, when I registered for Weibo, I encountered similar situations. I was surprised, could they use Weibo and WeChat so early? Before that, the only social platform I used was QQ. During my 3 years in high school, I rarely went online, and I hardly posted on QQ Space. Not more than 5 posts in 3 years. They all had a similar meaning: I'm going to Hengshui, I must go to Hengshui.